p.m. Ocala time yesterday, had a tree come through the ceiling in his bedroom. Divine providence, my friends. The guy's resilient. The last week, the crowd strike, the layovers, he's going to do his own planes, trains, and automobiles. We don't miss a show. This is why your producer and your caddy, you take care of them. Look at him. All right. We got Coach Matt Dean in Memphis going to check in with us. Johnny Ballpark Franks in Nashville. And Gary Harris, Tuscaloosa, tied 100.9 as well. Get pen and paper handy. Smash the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner because here we come live. We're in Auburn today, just road tripping around to see some of our sponsors and all. And get ready. Here we come.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
All right, look at this esteemed panel we're going to have here. Coach Matt Dean and Johnny Ballpark Franks got up at 4:30 this morning here in Auburn. Dr. Waller May and Susan May, the May Veterinary Clinic's house, went to the Iron Tribe fitness thing in Auburn. Starts at 5 o'clock. That was fun. What a way to start the day. I got Johnny. Looks like he's ready to roll. Coach Matt Dean and Brendan. Guys, a lot going on. Johnny, we were all out at Media Days. That was awesome. Matt, you watched it. Now we got ACC Media Days and Big Ten Media Days going on. I'm going to say this. I learned one thing. All the talk about the portal and NIL is just noise. As we're now starting to strap on the pads and you can start smelling the fresh cut grass on the practice field, it's college football season. We are 37 days away. Or if you're keeping track, I think that's 888 hours by my calculations from the start of another college football season, if anybody's keeping track. Johnny, say hello to Matt Dean. Matt, say hello to Johnny Ballpark Franks. He's in Nashville.
Good morning, Matt.
Native.
Hello, Johnny.
I tell you what, and he's got a son on Dan Lanning's staff at Oregon, and he's the lifelong Hawkeye, Johnny, so we're going to have some fun. Johnny, what did you see at Media Days that really caught your attention as we get ready for the 2016 season with our new best friends, the new kids in the cafeteria with the new backpacks that no one lets sit at their table, Texas and Oklahoma?
I think there's a lot of rat poison out there, and I think it's going to bite Georgia opening week is what I'm thinking.
Wow.
A couple of things that are out there. I always will go back to the 2008 and 2009 seasons and as perfect examples. Alabama with the lead in the fourth quarter in that SEC championship game, and they allowed it to get away. Florida wins the SEC title and then goes on to win the national championship. All the players that return from Alabama, I talked with many of them during the offseason leading up to that 2009 season. And so we get to the rematch per se. And one of the things that Alabama had going for it was all the fact that they walked off that field with that negative feeling, that bad feeling, and they used that as fuel. If you look at Clemson, you look at Dabo Swinney, they're feeling that. And then you're also getting all these good vibrations for the Georgia Bulldogs. I think Georgia loses that game against Clemson. And then, oh, by the way, who do they have to play at the end of September? They have to go to Tuscaloosa, take on Alabama. If they lose that game, we're looking at an 8-4 Georgia Bulldog team. And so, I mean, I know it sounds like a shocking thing because here's the thing. When Georgia gets back, later in their season, they have 5 tough games. I don't think they serve. If they already have 2 losses, I think they go 9-3, 8-4 at that point. So don't be shocked if Georgia does indeed lose to Clemson. Then I think that Georgia is not going to be the darling as they have been in recent years. This is something that Kirby Smart has not had to deal with, and I think it bites them this year.
It's going to be crazy. Look, I know one of our viewers, Mary Turner, the Turner Law Group in Tuscaloosa, likes hearing what you just said because Alabama beats them at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and they just want to get back to Atlanta to play them. Matt Dean, you heard what Johnny just said? A shot over the bow or just realism? Because one thing we love on this show is for people to speak their mind. The First Amendment light is on. Feel free to talk.
Well, Johnny just provided me some caffeine for this morning, guys. That's probably a bold prediction, but Johnny, I like it. I think one thing I know about that first week, there are a lot of games that are more competitive than week 5 and 6 when you've got more tape.
Absolutely.
And I do think Clemson, you look at their recent history, has not been what they've been accustomed to the prior decade. Yeah. But honestly, I mean, it would not shock me if that game is really, really close in the fourth quarter. And it could happen. And if it does happen, what Johnny said is going to ring true, and they'll probably be looking at a 9-3 season. Now, if they can survive that, I think they figure it out. And the beauty of the system now, guys, is we're gonna see 4 SEC teams in the playoff. Okay, so you don't have to get to the SEC championship game to make the playoff. And with Oklahoma and Texas coming in, what a gauntlet of a schedule! I mean, we could still see. Not saying it's going to happen. You could still see a 9-3 team highly considered for that last spot.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. I've got my top 4 in the SEC: Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Missouri. People are not giving Missouri a lot of credit because it's Missouri. I've been to Columbia. I live in Memphis. I know some Missouri fans. They are putting $250 million into that one end zone where the rock quarry is. Johnny, Brady Cook at Media Days, Luther Burden III. They've got some players, and they've got a really good in-state NIL deal, which makes that program very attractive. And it's one of only 6 colleges in America. I just have this stuff in my head, but there's only 6 schools in America that have a law school, a college of veterinary medicine, and a medical school. University of Florida is one of them. Missouri is one of the other ones. They got a lot to sell there.
They have a lot to sell, but I don't think anybody from those 3 departments that you just threw out there is going to help them on the football field.
I know.
So what is also is not going to help them is the fact that they lost an All-American running back that nobody but really even remembers his name, Cody Schrader, 1,600 plus yards, 14 touchdowns. So it's great that they got Brady Cook back. It's great that they got the incredible wide receiver. What they don't have is Cody Schrader, and that is the problem for Missouri, although I'm really high on Missouri. A team that I'm really high on too. Look, the way the scheduling worked out, you're not including Tennessee. Where is the 3rd loss for Tennessee? I see 2 losses. I don't see a 3rd. If Tennessee is 10-2, they will be one of the 4 playoff teams. Ole Miss, I love their schedule, and I had Archie Manning on my show 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
and I was bringing up the fact you have to go back to the early 60s. The last time Ole Miss won an SEC championship, I do believe they will be in Atlanta playing for the SEC title. Don't be shocked to see history made this year with the Ole Miss Rebels. So this is the first year I've ever filled out more than one prediction in the preseason for SEC or any other conference. And it's almost reminds me of what I do during March Madness. I fill out 2 brackets, one that I think will happen, and then the one that there's just a little bit of chaos. My one without chaos, Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama. The one with chaos, Georgia out, Ole Miss in, Alabama in, Tennessee in. Who's the 4th team? Very well could be Missouri.
Well, Matt, we hear all this talk about Texas, and I think about them. They won a lot of games last year. They keep hanging their hat on the win in Tuscaloosa, September 9th, if I'm not mistaken. That was one game. Now, they had the Red River Shootout. Oklahoma beat them for the 6th time in the last 7 years. This isn't a beat up on any school. You know how we are on this show. Oklahoma, Texas is better prepared right now at this moment to come into the conference. Matt, I'm going to throw this one at you. Texas, without Bo Davis on the defensive line, they lost some guys. Quinn Ewers has missed like 5 games over the last 2 years. Malik Murphy's gone. He's at Wake Forest quarterback. Arch Manning still there. What about Texas line of scrimmage? That's what the SEC is, an LOS league. Are they as strong this year as they were last year?
Well, let's first go with the quarterback room, which I think kind of identifies our top teams in the country for the most standard metric. They arguably have a top 1, 2, 3, or 4 quarterback room. I mean, we know Arch Manning hadn't been in the field yet, but we know what's coming, right? I mean, there's a lot of pedigree there. And Quinn Ewers, when healthy, is obviously going to be a top, not the top pick in the draft, but he'll be a top quarterback taken in an NFL draft. So right away, I think Texas obviously is probably one of the best offensive teams in the country. Now, go back to your original question, line of scrimmage. Coaching matters. We know what losing Coach Davis means on that D-line. I think they get the thing, guys, I grew up in the Big Ten and the old Big 8, right? And that's what really, if you look at Texas the last few years in the Big 12, they had some weeks where they can get healthy and not even have to play really quality football. And I'm not taking a shot, but the thing that I think is going to be different for both Oklahoma and Texas, and obviously they're well equipped from an organizational standpoint, from a booster standpoint, from an endowment standpoint. But, man, you just don't get weeks off in the SEC like you do in the Big 12 from a scheduling model. If you have someone dinged on your line of scrimmage or you're having to play your second-string quarterback, you're going to put yourself in peril. I mean, I just think that the gauntlet that they're facing is different than the gauntlet they've ever faced from a scheduling perspective. So I think they're going to be in the top 4. I really do. But I'm going to tell you another team that's really intriguing to me is what's Oklahoma's path the next few years going to be like? I know Venables has done a really good job on the recruiting trail. They got all the factors to be really good. But, man, this league just beats you down. I mean, I didn't even realize that stat about Ole Miss and SEC championship.
Yeah.
I think, I may be going overboard here, but with what Coach Kiffin has assembled offensively, gosh, I love watching the Rebs play, man.
I do too.
I don't even know what their nickname is anymore, but I love watching Ole Miss football.
I do too. Johnny, I'm throwing at you. I love Archie Manning. I still remember as a kid watching over on Briardale off of Briarview at
Broken Arm.
Mary and L.V. Sharp's house, friends of our family. Mary went to Alabama and L.V. went to Ole Miss. And our family's all Auburn people watching the 33-32 game. Archie Manning, I hate to say the term royalty because he's not a snob. He's from Drew, Mississippi. I hunt down there in Lambert. I know Drew. I know Highway 49 down there by Parchman. How cool was that interview?
Oh, it was just, I go back to my first thoughts about watching college football as a kid. I mean, I do remember that 69 game. It was an 8 o'clock kickoff, and Scott Hunter with Alabama outduels Archie Manning and Ole Miss. And then in 1970, Ole Miss gets the better end of the deal as far as that game is concerned. So to have him on my show, it was just incredible. And now I feel like I got a new friend in Archie.
Yeah.
Going back to Texas, it's funny, Matt. When I start breaking down how I think a team is going to be as far as an upcoming season, I look at the strength of the offense and defensive lines first. Yeah. Because I don't care if you've got the greatest quarterback in the world. If you don't have someone to block you, Texas, top 5 offensive line, defensive line, top 10 in the country. So I love that. Plus, let's just face it. Have you looked at Texas' schedule? Easy schedule. Oklahoma, they must not like Oklahoma very much. Texas has an easy schedule in the SEC this year. They do play Georgia. That's really it. Now, Texas A&M, rivalry game. Texas A&M could spoil some things, especially if Texas loses to Michigan. So that means Texas would already have 2 losses. If they lose to Texas A&M, that last game of the year, 3 losses could keep Texas out. I don't think it's going to happen. That's why I have Texas getting into the playoffs with a 1-loss team, but it doesn't mean that they're a good team. Look, Texas, they escaped so many games last year. Yeah. If they played that way inside the SEC, they're going to have some losses building up. I mean, escaping Houston, TCU. I mean, they were very fortunate. And I go back to the whole thing with the playoff committee. The playoff committee wanted Florida State, and they wanted Alabama. but they couldn't take Alabama without taking Texas.
Yes.
That's why Florida State got left out. It wasn't because they were in love with Texas. They were in love with Alabama. They had to take Texas because Texas beat Alabama, and I'll go to my grave believing that.
Totally agree. I know we can't play bump music because of copyright on the podcast, but I'm going to say it. If I'm the Texas strength coach, I've got blaring on the loudspeakers in the strength training, facility, Martha and the Vandellas, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Now you go beat Alabama on the road, whoop-de-doo, la-di frickin' da. The next week you get to go home and host Georgia or go on the road to LSU. That's going to be the difference. Houston Nutt, I love it. He goes, I live in McKinney, Texas, there north of Dallas, and I talk to a lot of these Texas and OU fans. He said, I keep telling them, I go, men, these are the best days of your life, college football, but it's the grind in the SEC, that grind just week in and week out. He goes, I know, I coached it, I've lived it, I've played it. It's true, Matt Dean. As a coach, when you're playing inferior competition, sorry if I hurt people's feelings, but we deal in the truth here, okay? It doesn't make you any better. It says in the good book, iron sharpens iron. And I think these SEC schools are used to that. You could take, last year, I think Florida State got hurt. I know Johnny's the Florida State grad. They were hurt because the ACC as a league was perceived as not as strong because Johnny and I are the same age. I've grown up with Florida State. They were a staple, and they are again now. Now, they don't want to be in the ACC, it doesn't sound like. But, Matt, you think about Texas. They got talent. You can't win without backups, can you?
No, and to Johnny's point, I definitely agree about the line of scrimmage comment, Johnny. I think one of the things that I thought that was interesting about Texas, you could also say their best two interior linemen have now been drafted, and in their game against Washington, they got exposed defensively even with those guys. So if I have a thing right now, if I have any questions about Texas, it'd be on the defensive side of the football. I agree with the offensive line play. I agree with the quarterback room, and I agree with all their weapons. But honestly, I think when it comes down to it is their pressure they're going to put on defenses, even if they have a lapse defensively, they should go 10-2. I will tell you what's an interesting game is the at Michigan game. I think it's 11 a.m. broadcast, maybe week 2, whatever, of I don't know if week 0 is week 1, whatever we call it. Michigan has a new coach. Obviously, he served as an interim coach last year when Coach Harbaugh was on whatever one of the you want to call it. I'm real curious to see Michigan this year. I really am. I think if Texas goes in there and takes care of business in Ann Arbor, I think it kind of sets the template for the year. But I'm going to go back to you a little bit about with your Georgia-Clemson analogy. If Michigan were to beat Texas, that changes the whole dynamic a little bit. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Texas wins that game on the road by a touchdown, but that's going to be a really intriguing game to me. And then in getting back to the gauntlet, Johnny mentioned Texas A&M, who's got a lot of weapons coming back, a new coach, Mike Elko, who I'm familiar with. My son used to work for him. So defensively, they're going to be a lot better from a scheme perspective, but they have to stay healthy too. The last few years, they have had a barrage of injuries.
I like him, by the way. I don't know your opinions, Matt and Rob, but I like Coach Elko a lot, and I think players love him. And hey, how about this? We're getting down to the end of the year, last game of the season. Texas A&M would love to spoil Texas this season. Love it.
They love them.
Yes, but he has a great. If I'm a player, I think that he would be an incredible coach to play for. He just comes off that way.
Elko at media days, he is impressive. And I asked a question to him. I said, the last guy that left Duke that had success, that won 9 games in a season, was Steve Spurrier. Went on and had a lot of success at Florida because David Cutcliffe had some success there, but he went to the SEC office in Birmingham, a Banks High School graduate from Birmingham. You could write a book about all the great high schools in Birmingham. So you're talking about Clemson, interesting thing I just read about Dabo has his new version of the portal. It's called the NFL portal. He's getting his players to go get their grades for the draft. And if it doesn't look like they're going to be a first round, or barely into the second round, he's able to convince these guys to come back. See, that's the free market working its way. Clemson beating Georgia. And that's not going to be a home game for Georgia. Because Johnny and Matt, y'all know Auburn and Clemson fans think Atlanta's theirs too.
Right.
Mercedes-Benz Stadium is an awesome venue to watch a football game at. It's in Atlanta. Next year, we're going to be back in Atlanta for SEC Media Days. I'll throw this one. And Johnny, your thing on Georgia, you're thinking Georgia 9-3, 8-4. Georgia's at a point now where they've won so much. I noticed Kirby at Media Days talked about they went to the Nike Leadership School this summer, where you learn first, middle, last name, everything about your teammates. They're looking for things to keep them motivated because they've won so much. Y'all may think I'm crazy to say that. Agree or disagree? Start with you, Matt.
You know, we hear the word from coaches, the word complacency sets in sometimes, right? When you've won multiple national championships. And honestly, I think Georgia really sent a message to everyone last year in the Florida State Bowl game. We know Florida State had, 20-plus players that didn't play.
31, I think.
31, I'm sorry. But I think, one of the things, the message Kirby sent to everyone is, hey, my guys stayed and played. My guys stayed and played. And we felt like not only should we have been in the college football playoff, we were the best team in the country last year. So in their minds, they were making a statement. I just think it gets harder and harder. And to your point, Rob, I really believe, I wasn't even thinking we were going to talk about Clemson, Georgia today. But the more I think about that game, Dabo's trying to recapture some magic too. He's got his guys drinking the Kool-Aid. I don't care what you say. They're going to figure it out. And honestly, last year, if I'm not mistaken, didn't they have Florida State beat and missed a chip shot field goal in the last second?
Yes.
I mean, overtime, it went to overtime. So
that's right. So I just think that's one of the best games all season, week one. Kind of like last year, we saw Florida State week one have a tremendous performance against LSU. It would not shock me in the slightest. If Clemson does that, they beat Georgia, then we're looking at obviously Clemson as a serious playoff contender. And I think if them and Florida State are 1-2 in the ACC, regardless of how it happens, I think both will be in regardless.
Johnny Ballpark Franks.
Well, and I go back to that whole thing, with as far as motivation. For me, especially 18 to 22-year-olds, they don't like to be dissed. They don't like to be looked down upon. They don't want their pride questioned. Clemson's players, that Clemson program, pride, their manhood, everything has been questioned. I go back to 2010, Alabama returning Greg McElroy, returning Julio Jones, returning Mark Ingram. How bad did they beat everybody to win the national title in 2010? They didn't. They finished in the top 10 with 3 losses.
Yeah. Now,
they were two great teams, and I get that, but it doesn't matter. 3 losses anyway. And to me, that's what Georgia, and that's a tough one. When to me, it's a lot easier to get a player motivated with talent that's been getting a lot of negative things, and they've been doubting the program, doubting Dabo. It's a lot easier to get that player motivated and up for a game, especially week one. Because, yes, we know Georgia is going to be a national championship contender this year on paper. But are you going to be clicking on all cylinders week one? Clemson will be, in my opinion, because they've got so much more to play for.
Yeah.
Georgia, once again, they're all the tea leaves. Everybody's saying that they're already just penciled them in.
Yeah.
They win their 3rd national title in 4 years. And I say, wait a second.
Yeah. Well, let's think of another one. August 31st in the Swamp, Miami. Lots of people love Mario Cristobal. I mean, why not? He's a pretty nice guy, it seems. He's about a 500 career coach. I don't see Miami. Last year, they were 3-5 in the ACC. It wasn't a great league. In the SEC, they may have won 1 or 2 games, if they won that many. Florida, I'm going to make a case for them, Matt. 63% is blue chip 4- and 5-star players on that roster. Again, our intern, Oakley, is looking into this. I'm going to get him to look into this for us. Does that blue chip index account for the portal? Graham Mertz, got to be around him at Media Days. His mentor, who's working with him, is Danny Werfel. Matt, can you make a case for Florida jumping out, getting a big win in game 1 in the Swamp against Miami?
Absolutely. I think what Florida players are hearing all off season is you guys your coach is on the hot seat. You guys are not that great. And the reality is everyone's saying they have one of the toughest schedules in the SEC, which they do.
Yeah.
So I think in the swamp, opening week, the one thing I will say about Mario is he collects a lot of talent. My son's at Oregon, and he left a lot of players at Oregon. He's done a really good job recruiting, but for some reason, it doesn't always clicked on the football field. Now, let's not forget, he was the head coach at Oregon when they went into Columbus and beat Ohio State several years ago, too. So
yeah, I remember that.
I'm not going to sell him down the river just yet, but I make a case for Florida winning that game because I think that their players know, first of all, it's the U. No matter what you say, they're playing an in-state rival, and it's at home, electric atmosphere. I like Florida in that game.
Johnny, looking at the SEC right now, top to bottom, 1 through 16. You're in Nashville. I heard Chuck Oliver, my friend on his show last week, say they've quiet quit college football. I hate hearing that. I say it a lot. A lot of my family graduated from Vanderbilt. You agree with him?
They quit college football in the late 90s. Here's the thing. No, and I worked in college.
That was a setup question.
I worked in college athletics in the late 90s here in Nashville. I was associate athletics director at Tennessee State. Everybody understood what the Tennessee Oilers / Tennessee Titans were doing to the market, meaning they were taking the fans. They were getting all the attention in the media. It was the late 90s. If you were Vanderbilt, if you were Belmont, as far as basketball, if you were going to be whatever you were going to be, you better put your plans in place then. Now they're doing it. What year are we in? 2024?
Correct.
27 years later? A little too late. We're talking about the haves and the have-nots. We're talking about dividing up Division I. And guess what? Vanderbilt is going to be like Swanee and Tulane. I will see and envision a day where Vanderbilt is not a part of the SEC. And look, Vanderbilt can only blame themselves. And I'll go another thing. James Franklin, when he was head coach, this is the reason why we went down this path anyway, is because they were ready for big-time football, winning games, ready for it. And what happened? We had the rape case. And it's like, we want to win games. We want to be that, we want to be the Yale and Harvard of the South, but we don't want to win games knowing we're getting that publicity. We don't want to have to recruit players like that. And if you go to the West Coast to East Coast, you pick out any team in any of these Power 5 conferences, and I can probably point a case, whether it's murder or rape or some kind of situation on these campuses. And that is the part that comes with being big time in sports. So as far as Vanderbilt, forget about it. Their pick, it wasn't even, that was the one thing when I was picking 1 through 16, didn't even have to think about it. And no offense to Clark Lee or anybody with that program, but it's a little too late. Get ready to play in the bottom half Division I, which is great. You could be the champions of that league. But as far as the way when we're looking at the Alabamas, Georgias of the world, Michigan and Ohio State, that's where Vanderbilt ends. As far as Florida and Miami, by the way, Florida better win that game, because if they don't win that game, they're going 5-7 at best. There's a reason why Billy Napier is the number one choice to be fired as far as the first head coach at the Division I level. Because this is what's going to happen. Even if they win that game, they're going to lose 6 of their last 7 games. So if they don't have their 6 wins already, by the time they get to that stretch, they're not going to even be bowl eligible this year.
They got to start off with momentum, because you get a win you're not expected to get, then you have the confidence. That last 5 games that they have, Georgia, LSU, Texas, Ole Miss, and Florida State. I think they can win some of those, but how they start the first of the season will keep that team together. If they're losing, it's just a harder sell as the season goes on. Johnny, I know you said you've got to leave at about 1:30. Love having you on. Tell folks how they can follow you, because you do a great show on the UMP in the smartest city in Alabama, Huntsville, every Monday, and it's a definite must-watch, listen content.
And I am working on getting these great interviews. I've been I had Steve Spurrier on. I have had the chance to interview over 60 plus Heisman winners, hundreds of top 10 finishers. I had not had the chance to have Steve Spurrier on until 2 weeks ago. So 14,000 guests later, finally Steve Spurrier. And so I was happy about that. I think he really liked the fact too, by the way, Matt, that I was bringing up Duke, because Duke really holds true. And the more when I was researching to have him on, by the way, I got into the conversation is the fact that it's so easy for us when we do the Mount Rushmore of head coaches to go Bear Bryant, Nick Saban, Eddie Robinson, Bobby Bowden, or is it Joe Paterno? Nobody ever talks about Steve Spurrier, and a couple of things there. A lot of his success before the internet, and it was one of those things where, but look at what he did at Duke. Look at what he did at South Carolina. It's well known what he accomplished at Florida. I don't think, but this is strange from a Florida State grad, I don't think Steve Spurrier gets enough credit as a head coach at the collegiate level. Remember, if we'd had a playoff system, 14 playoff back in the early decade, like 2011, 12, 13, South Carolina would have been a playoff team, I think 2013. So we forget about that kind of success at South Carolina. But I'm sorry I have to leave because this is so much fun. Matt, I so appreciate having a chance to talk with you. Rob, it's always a pleasure. Really easy on X Twitter. Follow me at BP Frank Show. I've reduced my show level. I'm only doing one show a week. It's every Monday, and it's the reason why we're Legends Hang Out. I try to have 1 or 2 legends every Monday. It's from 5 to 7 Central Time. If you're in the Huntsville area, you can listen 7:30 a.m. and 103.9 FM, but you can also go to the internet, umpsports.com, and also just download the Ump app. But it's a pleasure. And Matt, we have to do this again. I love Matt. Matt's great.
Anytime. Johnny, love having you on. We'll do it again next week, okay?
Thank you. Look forward.
You bet. Hey, and here's Perry Mason, the great citrus farmer down in Central Florida, talking about Steve Spurrier as a player. And there's so much you can say about him. Let me say something about our great sponsors. RumbleBoxingGym.com in Memphis, 1835 Union Avenue, Midtown Memphis. How you fight is how you live. The Vitamin Shop, Oxford and Olive Branch, Mississippi. 2 locations open every day of the week, 9:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday, as they say down south, and on Sundays, 10:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. Gaddis Home Innovation, great folks out there. George Gaddis, home security systems, home entertainment systems, man caves, offices, anything. Operate your world from the palm of your hand. Gaddis Home Innovation. And you're in the market for a hunting dog. Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, I've known Chris Aiken since 1995. The best kennels, Jonesboro, Arkansas, hunting dogs, trains them. He's got about 10 people on his support staff. Check him out on Facebook, Web-Footed Kennels, Jonesboro, Arkansas. Chris, one of the best guys, true grit hunter. I've hunted with him. I watch how he handles his dogs over 30 years competing in these trials. Solid as a rock guy. And all of our sponsors, again, Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. I just got myself a pair of Greater Kudu boots, man. They get boots custom made of anything, ostrich, python, you name it. They can get boots made for you. And they also are the second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast. They've got Old South Closing, STS, Pendleton, Schaefer Outdoors, and more duck heads than you'll see anywhere short of a duck refuge. I mean, it is unbelievable. HewlettandDunn.com. Matt, Gary Harris will be joining us here in just a moment from Tuscaloosa. That conversation with Johnny, Steve Spurrier, 23 years, Florida 12 years, South Carolina 11. Little known factoid, from 1989 to 2009, Florida was the winningest program in all of college football. In that time frame, I think they collected 8 SEC championships and 3 national championships. Spurrier, 90 to 01. I hate that he left Florida, went to the Redskins. It just doesn't, you can't control everything, but he's got to be up there among the best coaches of all time. He changed more than anyone college football in the SEC, from a ground and pound to the wide open offenses, and he ran way more than people want to give him credit for, didn't he?
Yeah, he was very multiple. And Rob, I just think from people I know in the industry, I think his players love playing for him. And I think that's you see some of the paths that college coaches go to the NFL. I think Coach Spurrier was just a phenomenal coach. I think he was a better college coach. And I think some guys are fit for those 18 to 22-year-olds. And
Correct.
I think Johnny was 100% correct about what he did at South Carolina. You look at the Duke factor and just things like I got to tell you, Rob, I'm a visor guy because of him. I know that's not football related.
I love visors.
I got a bigger head, man. I need that room for that visor. But I just think if you look back at what he did for the league, I can't. I agree. I mean, we always talk about Rushmore and a set of certain coaches. He's right there, Rob. He is right there. And I think that's what's really tough right now. If you're a Florida football fan and you're looking at the schedule, and we just said that if we don't win the first game, they could be 5-7. I just think that's, Brendan, there you are. I think that's hard to swallow.
I've had some trees fall down, so I got tree remover guys, and I've got insurance and adjusters and all sorts of guys showing up at the front door right now.
A lot of guys
and workers there. At least I'm glad you got workers there. That's good.
Let's bring Gary Harris in. He just popped in.
Yeah, Brendan always finds excuses to win, just like this guy Gary Harris, Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa, WVUA TV 23, grew up in Miami, raised in the Yellowhammer State. He and Rodney Orr do a great show Tuesday night, 6:30 p.m., Tider Insider TV. Two of the best guys we have on this show. You get to know these guys on the air, off the air. I call them friends, and I'm honored to have you on. Gary, man, we are, 37 days away, or I guess you could be correct and say 888 hours away from the start of college football season. I'm keeping track. I know you are too, but what's going on in Titletown? Anything?
Hey guys.
Anything, Bueller?
Yeah. Me running behind this morning. Didn't want to get up. Been a long week, and I running a little bit behind, but I'm here and ready to go. Yeah, just like everybody else now. The countdown to kickoff is on, and you know how that goes. I mean, we've enjoyed the summer, but now it's time to get serious. I mean, I've been thinking about Jalen Milroe and how active he's been making the rounds. He's got a management team that's made sure that he's been out there, and he's done a lot of different events, which is great. And he was at Yankee Stadium last night with Aaron Judge. He gave Judge an Alabama 99 jersey, and he got a bat back from Judge. And then this morning he's making the rounds on all the talk shows up there in New York City. ESPN, I think the morning shows on the networks, and very, very visible, which is no doubt going to help his Heisman campaign if he plays well. And I mean, that's the key now. I mean, he is, he finished 6th last year, so he's the highest returning vote getter in the Heisman race. Everybody knows who he is. He's highly visible, but the play now has to back it up. And I think he understands that. We talked with him over the weekend at one of those at a College Football 25 EA Sports kickoff party they had here in Tuscaloosa. He was there, of course, and he made it clear that come Wednesday he's going to be dialed in and ready to go for football when they open fall camp here in Tuscaloosa.
Matt,
Gary, it's great to see you, man. I've had a quick question of you. It was funny. I was looking at the Bama schedule, and I see you guys are making a trip to Big Ten country this year to play Wisconsin. That's got to be. Have you guys ever played before? I mean, I don't remember Alabama, Wisconsin. Maybe I'm wrong. Is this a first time for that matchup?
I think way, way, way back they might have met. And I'd have to even look it up like in the 1920s. But
right
in the modern era, in this, and I could be wrong on that. This could be the first time. Period.
I don't know. I just thought it was a unique matchup.
It is. It really is. And and I'm like everybody else that's never been to Camp Randall. Is certainly familiar with the reputation and what what those fans bring to the table, and we know that with Alabama coming up there for a visit, that it's going to be the place is going to be jumping. And I got a lot of respect for Luke Fickell. I think he's one of the finer football coaches in the country, and it's going to be. I'm glad you mentioned it, Matt, because I think that's a game that not being overlooked, but I think Alabama fans as a whole are just zeroed in on that Week 4 matchup. Well, Week 5 they have a bye week, but the matchup against Georgia at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And here you have 2 home games against Western Kentucky and against South Florida, and then it's off to Wisconsin. And that's going to be that's the big noon kickoff on Fox, so it's an 11 a.m. Central kick. And, yeah, I think it's a game that Alabama should win, I believe, but that's a but there. If you go up there and you don't play well, you can walk out of there with an L. And then you go into that bye week with Georgia coming in 2 weeks later on a loss, and it'll be miserable around here. So that is a big, big football game early in the year. And Wisconsin's a good team.
Look, Wisconsin, those are the guys they're made in the weight room. They're not going to get credit for a top 15, top 20 even class, not even top 25, but you'll get a full 60 out of them. That's a great idea to take that road trip. Gary, I was impressed talking to Tyler Booker. Funny, weighs 330 pounds. I said, you don't look a pound over 280, I mean, a little guy. But several people asked him about Nick Saban, and he just would keep this S-eating grin, going like, Coach Saban is he's an external factor. He's outside the building now, trying not to laugh because the GOAT is now an external factor. It was really cool, though. I would go stand by the SEC network set about 10 feet away, watching the body language of Nick Saban. He is so dialed in, and he was watching. He had his seat turned back toward the podium, whatever coach was up there, and they all, one by one, talked about the influence he'll still have on the game. That's really cool, and he did not try to suck up all the oxygen in the room. It's impressive, but the one I just wanted to go tell him, say, Coach, I know you've won a lot of games, you got a lot of success, but I wanted to go say thank you for what you and your wife did to help fund the Saban Student Catholic Center on campus, because I got a lot of friends that don't even go to Alabama, didn't go there, don't even have a kid there, that when they're on business in Alabama will go out of their way to go to Mass at the Saban Catholic Student Center. I think that's pretty cool, and I think he is very proud. I asked Kalen DeBoer about his upbringing with that of his predecessor, Nick Saban. I think he likes people that came and worked their butt off to get where they are. Kalen DeBoer, his story is really cool, but he exudes confidence. Now, lose 2 or 3 games, I think he'll be able to handle it. But, Matt, you're right about that Wisconsin game. Gary, you don't want to lose that. And then you got Georgia coming in. But, hey, Gene Stallings' first year, 0-3 start. The next year they go on the road September 14th, 1991 in the Swamp and lose 35-0. It's the end of the world as we know it. Get rid of him, fire them all, and Alabama proceeds to reel off 28 straight victories and a national championship. Go figure. Don't panic.
Yeah, as Coach Stallings said, you definitely don't want to start 0-3 at Alabama. That's not recommended. That was one of his favorite phrases. But, yeah, I have a lot that you said right there. First, starting with Coach Saban, there's been a lot made about the fact that he didn't pick Alabama to make it to the SEC championship game, that he picked Georgia and he picked Texas. And I've had people calling it on my show and here in town have seen me and said, well, they thought he was doing that for motivational purposes and wanted to, make sure that Alabama was motivated or give them something to use, or that he didn't want to put any pressure on Kalen DeBoer. I don't see it that way at all. The way that he approaches his life is that he gives 100% in everything that he does, including as a college football analyst. And I don't think he liked the question. I was watching, I didn't go to Dallas. I had a crew out there, but I was watching on television when he was asked the question by Laura Rutledge, and he didn't really like the question. I mean, I don't think he was really ready to make a pick, but that's his job. And, he couldn't so I think he honestly picked the 2 teams that he thinks right now are best suited to make it to Atlanta. Now, he said this is July. Basically, he said, it's a long way from football, and I think Alabama's going to have a really good team. But he honestly answered that question because that's who he is. And that's, he's so prepared. As you said, he's good at that. But he did not try to overwhelm people. The part about the coaches paying tribute to Nick Saban, I know if I were a coach in this league, and I was standing at a podium at SEC Media Days, I would certainly acknowledge him as well, particularly with him sitting in the back of the room. And that was all done. Another big story, of course, has been Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. A lot of fans feel like he should be on the stadium, not on the field. But you know how I am, Rob, and I think you're the same way. I'm not big on revisionist history, and I'm not big on changing history. I know President Denny was 100 and something years ago, but he earned that spot on that stadium just like Coach Bryant did. And Bryant Denny Saban Stadium is a little busy. I like the fact that they made it Saban Field, not Nick Saban Field, because I think they want to honor Miss Terry as well. They're a dynamic duo. And I think that while some fields and stadiums, when you refer to the stadium, you don't refer to it. Rarely do I hear Pat Dye Field at Jordan Hare Stadium. I just hear Jordan Hare Stadium.
Yeah.
But I do think that in this case, the way it rolls off the tongue, Saban Field at Bryant Denny Stadium, you're going to hear a lot of people say Saban Field at Bryant Denny Stadium. I just think that and the Sabans are really happy with it. So I'm good with it. About Kalen DeBoer's confidence. Yeah, I do think he's confident. I think that comes from a track record of success. I know a lot of that was at the lower level, but still 104-12. Rob and Matt is 104-12. I mean, he's won 104 games and lost 12. He knows how to win. He knows what it takes to win.
Yeah.
And to take Washington to the national championship game, beat Texas in the college football playoff semifinal in his second season, he's got a track record at the highest level. So I think he's confident in what he does and the way that he does it. And I do think this is something. Washington was really good last year. And not only on the field, but you saw it in the NFL draft. They had as many players drafted as Alabama did. That was a talented team. Mm-hmm. But talking to some people around here, a couple on the staff, this is still, even over last year's Washington team, the most talented roster. I'm just talking in terms of talent. I'm not saying that this team is seasoned or ready to go or any of that, but in terms of talent, this is the most talented roster that Coach DeBoer and these guys that are on this staff that came to Alabama have ever been a part of, whether they came from Washington or they came from somewhere else. So they're inheriting a good situation. This was not a 6-6 team. This was a 12-2 team that won the SEC championship and played in the college football playoff semifinal at the Rose Bowl. So it's a good situation for Coach DeBoer. But yeah, I like the way he carries himself. He respects Coach Saban, but he's not intimidated by the job. He wouldn't have taken it, I think, if he was, and I think he'll be ready to go.
Yeah, a little bit of history. No revisionist history. George Denny was the president of the University of Alabama during the 1930s, during the so-called Great Depression, spelled Grate. It was horrible. But he got a lot of criticism for letting a bunch of kids from the Northeast come in. Sometimes they didn't get into Yale or Harvard. They came down south because Alabama had the first accredited college of business in 1917 of a state university in the South. And he brought a lot of these people down here and kept the doors open. He said they pay full tuition, out-of-state tuition, which was a big deal. Without George Denny, there may not have been a football program for Coach Bryant from Fordyce, Arkansas, Morrow Bottoms, also the home of Larry Lacewell, the second best coach to come out of Fordyce. And that was also where Houston Nutt's father was from. But bottom line, don't you dare. I mean, I'm just saying this. George Denny, Bryant Denny Stadium, what Coach Bryant did. Are you kidding me? I know it's very popular, but talk to anyone who's been around. Those guys sacrificed a lot for that university. And I think, Saban Field at Bryant Denny Stadium, Pat Dye Field, when George Wallace dedicated Jordan Hare Stadium in 1973 at the Auburn-Ole Miss game. Auburn won 14-7. Chris Vaccarella and Jeff Gilligan had big games with Phil Gargis at quarterback out of Colbert County, Leeton, Alabama. But he said that stadium was the first one ever dedicated for a coach named in his honor who was actively coaching. And he said, henceforth and forever from here on, Cliff Hare Stadium will be the Jordan Hare Stadium. Well, it's a big deal, but Denny chimes. Without that guy, the doors closed at the University of Alabama in the 1930s with a lot of other schools. Don't forget what he did. That came from my friend, the late John Barnett Turner, whose brother has a box at Bryant Denny, and his son is my attorney, an Alabama graduate. That guy is a big figure in Alabama history. Jump back in here, Matt. It's savant time here. I get carried away. Too much coffee.
Real quickly, let me just say this about President Denny. Because you laid it out well. there's a lot of people who are saying, man, take his name off the stadium, make it Bryant Saban Stadium. And you got Denny Chimes. Coach Saban came along in a different era. That does, as you said, you pointed it out well, that doesn't make it any less important who George Denny was in his time or Coach Bryant in their time. In their time, they were mammoth figures in the history of the University of Alabama. And I'm like you, and I don't know how Matt feels about it. I'm just not big on taking people's names off of buildings and stadiums when they've earned it. And a quick thought on Pat Dye, because I've had a lot of people tell me, well, Coach Saban's much more accomplished than Pat Dye. It's really not. And Rob and Matt, Pat Dye, for what he did at Auburn at that time, in my opinion, just as big a figure at Auburn as Coach Saban is at Alabama. And I know people saying, oh, he won 4 straight SEC championships, but the biggest thing he did, he leveled the playing field for Alabama and Auburn. And Pat Dye is a huge, huge figure in Auburn football history. And I'm not saying he was, it's arguable whether he was the best coach in Auburn history, but I think he was the most important coach, you could argue, in Auburn history. So he earned his spot on that stadium as Pat Dye Field the same way that Nick Saban has. So I'm happy with it.
Pat Dye Jr. told us on this show June 26th of 2020, about 3 weeks after his father died. He said, I don't think I could have done this show 3 weeks ago. I was too emotionally upset. He said, but I can tell you this. The first phone call that I got when my dad died was from Nick Saban and Philip Fuller and Kirby Smart. And he said, I got a letter from a coach that said, I remember playing against your dad in 1980. It was a hard-fought game. He was the coach against that Wyoming was playing. Andy Reid was at maybe Air Force or Boise or something, but he wrote this long letter about him, signed Andy Reid. Look, you better know your history, your traditions, and your heroes. Matt, Niall Kinnick Stadium. It's not Neil. It's Niall Kinnick Stadium. Was a World War II aviator. Don't you ever try to take these names off. Hey, like the coaches will tell you, this place was great long before we got here. Matt, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, 2 quick examples, and I'm totally on board with what you guys said. Growing up in the state of Iowa, Niall Kinnick, former Heisman Trophy winner for the Hawkeyes. I mean, he's in our history books forever. Mm-hmm. And then recently for us at Rhodes College, my longtime colleague and former boss, Herb Hilgeman, it's Mallory Gymnasium, but now it's a Herb Hilgeman Court. When you make those type of decisions, they're very, very impactful. And just quickly getting back to Alabama's schedule for a second, Gary, I was curious. I mentioned the Wisconsin game, which honestly, that's a game Bama's going to win. It's going to be a unique game because it could be like 17-3. But anyway, I think at Tennessee and at LSU will be a couple games for Coach DeBoer later in the season that are going to be unique venues that he's probably not accustomed to. And I think I'm just real curious your take on the schedule, because honestly, I think your home games you're gonna run the gamut. But I see at Tennessee, at LSU, and at Oklahoma is an interesting game, even though I think the Tide will win. But I think those 2 games are going to be really interesting games.
Oh, I do too. I mean, I think that as prepared as Coach DeBoer is, I think at the same time, until you have been through this league on the road, it is different. And the Pac-12 I thought was a really good league last year, and I hate it's gone. I mean, I'm just sick that it's gone. But having said that, going to Knoxville, and not just going to Knoxville or going to Baton Rouge, but going as the coach at Alabama.
That's right.
Because Alabama going to those venues, they're already special home atmospheres, but you bring Alabama into Neyland Stadium, you bring Alabama into Tiger Stadium, it's even ramped up another notch, dude. So, those are games that, 2 years ago, I thought Alabama was a national championship caliber team, and they lost at Tennessee in a heartbreaking fashion. And they lost at LSU in a heartbreaking fashion and kept them from going to Atlanta and probably being in the playoffs. So, and then late in the year, going to Oklahoma, you're right, for game number 11. Norman, that time of the year, and I hope that's not the case, but you can have weather out there in Norman, Oklahoma in November. You can have weather. And so those are 3 games that on the road, even though Oklahoma's new to the league, that's going to be an incredibly difficult place to play. If you don't play well, those could be 3 L's. I mean, you could go into the Iron Bowl, 8-3. So, it's going to be a grind. I mean, it's that way for every team in this league, but last year, Alabama, the way Alabama's schedule falls, they get Tennessee and LSU at home in the same year. And then obviously they have to travel in the same year, and it's opposite the Iron Bowl. So that kind of works out well that they don't have all three of those games on the road in the same year. But yeah, those are going to be tough, and the Oklahoma game too. So strap it on, Kalen DeBoer, because going on the road in the SEC is never easy, particularly when you're going to places like that.
Yeah. I mean, and I love the conversation. Gary, I know you've got to go do your show on Tide 100.9. What are you talking about today?
Well, we've got Ellis Johnson on. Both you guys will be familiar with Coach Ellis Johnson. He comes on with me every football season, and we're going to kick that off today, man. I love talking with Ellis Johnson because, when you've been the defensive coordinator at Alabama and at Auburn and at Mississippi State and at South Carolina, you've been all over this league, and you've been, a head coach as well. And he talks to you in terms that people can understand. He doesn't try to get on there because he's been and try to, technically, three technique and cover this. And he just talks. And so we're looking forward to visiting with him, but going to have a heavy dose of SEC football with him. Of course, we continue the countdown to kickoff on my show. We're talking a lot of Alabama football, have interesting topics there. Jeff Spiegel, longtime sports anchor at ABC 3340 in Birmingham, will join me as well. So that's coming up at 9 at Tide100.9.com.
Gary, love it. Let's do it again next Thursday. Always love having you on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it, man.
All right. You bet. Matt, just a couple of more minutes before we wrap it up. We are broadcasting live. I'm in Auburn here today and tomorrow and head back up to Memphis. Going to meet with the Exo Armor people, the ones making the 3D casts and braces for athletics. Also going to meet with the Auburn group that's part of that AI conference that was chaired by Dr. Reed from the provost office, University of Florida, on AI, the SEC's role. Powerful stuff. Brendan understood it. I was there with him. Weren't that many people in the room? That's their fault. Matt, I am so fired up about this season. And because you know what? It's like that first day of school when the new kids are coming in the cafeteria. And when they come, is there a seat here? Oh, sorry, the table's full. It's going to be a lot of fun. You know what? Stuff never surprises me, but you're right about that Wisconsin game with Alabama. They will get a full 60 from those Wisconsin boys up on the peninsula. And the SEC and the Big Ten, I think you're going to start seeing more games during the season. Look, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world, people. Act like it. Go out and make great things happen. Tomorrow we got Chris Plank, sideline reporter for the Oklahoma Boomer Sooner Football Network. I know Doug Dean will be on with us, Frank Duffy, Dave Tompkins on special assignment, Brendan Martin, our executive producer, the toughest guy in production. Tree goes through his roof, misses a plane, trains, automobiles, the best. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal and the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.